Hello again, Tara. Thanks so much for staying with me tonight here on TCM.
Yeah, thanks for having me tonight.
Now that we've finished watching the 1931 version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde starring Frederick March, now we're going to look at the 1941 version with Spencer Tracy and Ingrid Bergman and Lana Turner. This one is very different. There were a lot more restrictions that they were working under. There were allowed to be no hints of rape or brutality of any sort. So how do you think this one differs because of that?
Well, I think from the opening scene, you know that this film has something different to say. Instead of it being sexual, it's theological. We open in a church and the priest is giving a sermon, and that's where Dr. Jekyll finds a patient that is having an issue and that there's something going on. He used to be a calm, easygoing guy, and now he's not. The bishop is at a dinner later and is a voice of God and expressing how God would feel about these things. So they were definitely treading in completely different water.
But you know what? To hear you say that makes me appreciate this film more automatically, because people always say, oh, well, the gold standard is the Frederick March version. And, you know, because of the code, they weren't allowed to do this or that. But what I'm hearing you say is that because of the restrictions, it allowed them to kind of rethink the story and maybe go a little bit deeper and more thoughtful about it, and to tie it to this idea of theology. I think it gives it a new dimension that is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And there's also things that I think are very contemporary with the time. So now Dr. Jekyll is a brain specialist. And so in the early 40s, we are now talking about manic depression. And it's interesting because if you look at Jekyll and Hyde, right, what's happening? He can't marry his fiance. He's depressed and sad about that. His colleagues think that he's full of bunk. And so he's depressed. And then who's Mr. Hyde? He's manic. He has no filter and he acts out on his nastiest thoughts and cruelest behavior.
And the director here, Victor Fleming, I think does some really interesting things. There's these really fascinating, elaborate, dreamlike sequences in the transitions from Jekyll to Hyde. I think the Franz Waxman score is very elaborate and kind of adds to the creepiness factor. So there's these other things at play, even though they couldn't be as explicit with the sex and the violence. There were other filmmaking tricks, if you will, that they could use to kind of set the tone.
But I think it's valuable to watch these two films back to back because you'll see how much the sex and violence is toned down. For instance, as we discussed in the first one, Champagne Ivy is a woman of easy virtue.
Yeah.
And so they make sure that Ingrid Bergman is a barmaid. She never gets near a stage.
Right.
And she tells Dr. Jekyll when he's in the room with her that she does not give herself to men. And
she's a victim through and through in this movie.
Absolutely.
Whereas I think Miriam Hopkins, kind of straddled that line between wanting it a little bit, although we might disagree on that. But my understanding is that even though this version is toned down compared to the 1931 version, there were still some aspects of it that were not allowed to be aired on television later?
Yeah. So once this gets to broadcasters, they find weird what I think we find weird, which is that weird transition you were just talking about. The one where Ingrid Bergman and Lana Turner become horses and Spencer Tracy is whipping them. That was a little much.
Yeah.
So they did have that cut out. And I think the story is fine without it.
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily need that. All right, Tara, thanks so much. And you'll be back next week for one more night in this fascinating spotlight.
I can't wait.
I appreciate it. But right now, here from 1941, starring Spencer Tracy, Ingrid Bergman, and Lana Turner, is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.